Last year at CitizenCon, folks, we saw a bunch of this, right?
As we focus on the quality, and it provides the quantity.
A lot of talk, a lot of stuff.
Terrain and rock scattering looks good. Let's add some.
All the way down to talking about like changing the way that minables will be scattered on planets. This is an entirely different way of making planets that they go through a lot of detail at last CitizenCon, just kind of explaining and telling us how it's going to happen. And this is probably going to be the biggest update to Star Citizen this year. This is going to be their big headline feature. I think that comes in November, and then they hopefully can stabilize in December before they leave us for holiday. We're not going to start here with what they've been saying at PlanetTech V5. We're actually going to do a little bit of a deep dive. Well, a big deep dive, as we have done, but not in a while. And we're going to go back from PlanetTech V4, back to PlanetTech V3, all the way to V2 in 2016 as Chris stood on stage and kind of flubbed this PlanetTech demo in my opinion, but you'll see why in a second. This was actually the first time we saw PlanetTech that we were going to get to find. Actually, we're not going to start with PlanetTech V2. We're going to start with PlanetTech V1. Okay? So this is a demo that was created by Marco Corbetta. This dude worked at Crytek. He actually was the lead programmer of Crytek's Far Cry and Crysis franchise. He wrote the 3D engine Equinox before his time at Prograph Research. He was credited in 2002 for Tsunami 2265. For all my real nerds from back in the day, I have no idea what they're talking about there. But he was pretty instrumental at Crytek. He came over to Foundry 42 and became the technical director and the VP of technology. He's still there. He's still doing some big stuff. So this is him back in 2009 experimenting with his first version of a PlanetTech engine in Crytek, or CryEngine. There's not really much to say about it. It's just kind of walking around in a city that was procedurally built. It's like a 5-minute video. It shows how he can create the city through like blocks, how he can damage different parts of the city and they dynamically despawn, all the different effects that he's worked on. And this is pretty cool. This is pretty crazy tech back then. Obviously, you know, they could probably do with a little more ray tracing to match today's visuals, but I think it still holds up quite well. It did not stay like this for long. Yes, this is 7 years later, but I think it was around 2014, 2015, he moved over to CIG and started working on this kind of PlanetTech with them. Here's Chris talking a little bit about where they went from there.
You can't have this amount of data in there, and it's amazing. And actually, when we show the demo, I think we've set it up so you can sort of see the frame counter, because what the guys have done there, you know, the game logic and the code and simulation slows everything down. Their actual engine generating the world is incredibly fast. So if you look at the top right, you'll sort of see when you're seeing the world, and you'll see it sort of drop. It's still going to be very fast, but you'll see the frame kind of drop when the game stuff starts.
So the funny thing about this presentation, and the thing that always gets missed, but I think it was CIG's fault, is that this demo has always been talked about as the biggest scope creep, kind of like you promised something and didn't deliver it ever, because it had the sandworm. In 2016, they got so much attention from this demo, and the sandworm was just never spoken about again. And obviously we're still trying to get it into the game now. We've been talking about it on the monthly report all year, but obviously when people see this demo, which is filled with gameplay, you know, and like the way that Chris talks about it here is all like, oh, look at how he's playing, and like he's driving through the area. And if you pay really close attention, you can tell that they're highlighting the PlanetTech stuff. But if you just watch this video, it does not look like a PlanetTech demo. It looks like a gameplay demo. So everybody always thinks of this as a gameplay demo. Where has this been? Why isn't this in the game? When in reality, it was just meant to show off the PlanetTech technology. That, I digress, doesn't matter. That's just CIG kind of stomping all over themselves with stuff like that. They're a little bit too deep in their own sauce, I think, at times. But this was the first real look at the public PlanetTech stuff that players were looking at getting. Now, there was actually another demo not too far away from this that we saw, another PlanetTech demo. that gave also an idea of what it might be like. This was Levski. This is the first time we saw it.
You know, people's lands and everything, respect local authorities. Peace wins every time. So definitely aging spaceship piece here. So let's head through the airlock into...
Hold on, you gotta recognize how hyped this was for these people.
Let's go to Glenn's view, Jared. That's perfect. There we go, beauty. And like plot out.
Good times. I mean, it was like maybe 2 years of hype, and really, obviously people didn't expect to be doing this when they first got into Star Citizen. So that was a big deal. Jump forward a few years though, and we're in 2019. Hurston has been delivered. ArcCorp has been delivered. And Crusader is still far off in the distance. They're working on gas clouds. They're trying to get multiple biomes working on a planet, because as of right now, Hurston was, it was kind of multiple biomes, but it was not as diverse as Microtech. So the next big thing coming up was Microtech. And at this point, they were still doing gameplay demos that they weren't necessarily Planetech demos, but they certainly weren't getting into the game quickly. And a lot of you will remember that in the Microtech demo they did, there were storms, there was foliage blowing in the wind, there was all this stuff that kind of built more of a dynamic feeling around planets. And that was a big part of what they wanted to do with this next version of Planetech, because they wanted to work on diversity, on biomes, on making people feel like they were getting into different areas when they landed in different areas.
Yeah, this is from first-person view. So this is on foot. Just taking a little hike through the snowy forest on your way back because your car broke down, probably. Get some warm jackets on.
Hope I have a spaceship.
But yeah, this is truly something that we are super happy about. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any other game that has this range of scale, from first-person close-up, cool stuff to these epic buildings.
So interestingly, we actually had the spaceport embedded on the terrain much sooner than we had trees on, and we're like, does that spaceport look a bit small? And then literally we got a new build with this in, and we're like, is that spaceport too big?
It's when you get those things that you recognize from a personal level. Like, I know how big a tree is, so that sense of scale is what is much needed with these epic structures, which you can't really tell until you've got those kind of reference points in.
No. Okay, so just want to share some assets.
Let me go forward to the biomes talk they have here.
And once again, these transitions, we're super, super happy with how these flow into each other.
Yeah.
So these are some of the assets that we did for the biome. Fairly small but simple pack, some nice colors, some nice flowers, and some remaining roots and trees that did not survive the initial frost.
So the interesting part about this is, like, we're going to get a ton of context from here to where they're building planets now, and you get to see that they make these handcrafted assets here, but over time they build that library out, and by the time we get to the discussions they're having in 2025, you can kind of see how you would be able to place a more diverse planet if you give a machine all this stuff and then tell it to put it in a certain place, and then you just come in and clean it up afterward. I say just come in and clean it up afterward. It's a lot of work. Thankful for them for it, but it's cool to see the growth of scale over the years. Remember, this is 2019.
So just wanted to show some remnants of that.
Okay, next biomes. So, so there's a kind of like an offset to these snow regions. I was really quite passionate about having areas of like quite intense color. So then we explored like these type of regions, you know, again, like reds, oranges, and things like that. And then also as part of the asset pack reuse, maybe instead of these rocks being covered with snow, we start to build up the lichen on there as well.
So these areas show actually what Microtech would look like if without all the snow and ice. And so we're seeing the same spruce actually as a conscious choice to have those return in a more unfrozen state, just to tie these areas together. And obviously, as you can see in the distance, to remind the player that these warmer regions are, there are not that many of them, so we wanted to make sure that there's always this epic mountains in the background, reminding the player that, they're never far away.
Yep.
Some of the assets that we did for the taiga region, so you see the red lichen, the rocks and the ground cover, everything has a bit more warmer colors.
All right. That's enough of this talk. I love Microtech. I can't wait to see what happens to Microtech when they apply the new Planetech stuff, because it is a truly beautiful planet. The next update I have for you on Planetech is from 2020, February. This was like maybe a couple weeks before we found out that COVID-19 was going to basically screw the entire world up. But this is a really cool video. This is actually one of the coolest Planetech videos they ever put out, because it talks about the height maps and how they manage those. It talks about the scattering system for rocks. It talks about the different layers that it takes to define the way the planet looks or how the temperature and humidity functions. It talked about how they use a paintbrush to scatter it around and how all of that can be defined to coordinate with height maps. It's a really cool video. He also talks with this guy again, going specifically into the height maps. This one is more about determining temperature, humidity, and how that works and functions throughout the planet. But there are multiple of these that you can find just by typing in Planetech on Star Citizen's YouTube page. But I'll let you hear kind of how he's describing the way that this stuff works here, because this is going to be a very important part of Planetech V5 we're about to see.
We have kind of a representation of what the temperature is like on our planet, and also these deformations and such, because you don't want it to be simple. There are all kinds of things going on a planet, like mountains and oceans, and all of these things can influence how the temperature can behave on the planet. For example, if you go up a mountain, right, you would expect the temperature to drop gradually as you're moving upwards. So that was the top one, right? Simple, temperature. Let's look at the bottom one, which is our humidity. The humidity and the temperature are basically combined in the end and saved out as one texture. But that one texture basically combines the data set, these two textures, so the information of our temperature and humidity. So I can also visualize that on our sphere here. And you can see that the humidity isn't simply a gradient going from the North Pole to the equator, and then it has a lot more breakup to it. There's a lot more variation going on. The humidity is also usually influenced by things like the ocean and mountains and such. We could also...
All right. Moving on a little bit, there is a really interesting part here where he shows us how they define these things. This is very much artist driven right now, right? That's mainly what we're seeing here. But again, as we move through this process, you're going to see how it goes from artist driven to largely machine learning and computing in combination.
Planet like this, how are the textures combined, and how can I paint on them? So you see that the highlight is around the equator now, and it's because around the equator I have a specific humidity value, which is different from another spot on the planet. Let's say, that is actually a good one. We have this brighter area and this darker area here, right? And I can totally, if I hover above it, you can clearly see that my highlight changes. That means that the data underneath is changing as well from this spot to that spot.
I wish they would just release some of these tools as games, so we could just make planets and then explore them Like, wouldn't you love to just be able to select areas on a planet and do cool things with them so that they meld together weirdly and then just go walk around it? It's sick.
Because if it was the same data, this would all be white or dark, or bright sand or dark sand. And I can further visualize that by simply picking the planet and then showing you here is the humidity. So for example, here where we get brighter values, it's very humid. And then here in the darker areas, it's very dry. If I had to compare that to, let's say, Earth, where you have the same temperature, let's look at the temperature again, because you can totally see that we have mostly brighter values here in the temperature, which means there's a very similar temperature in this region.
He keeps going through, and eventually he starts to color the whole planet. And you can get an idea of how this can build out biomes across a giant body of land.
Players never notice because we can give them the same data, but give them an entirely different paint path, so they look different and unrecognizable. It's unrecognizable that they are actually using the same data. So for example, I can just go in here and be like, okay, around my poles, I want a region where it's just ice or something like that, right? And it transitions over all the way to my pine needle forests, and then there come the broadleaf forests or something like that, right?
And then he loads it into engine, and you can see a little more how it looks.
Yeah.
Just reloading a planet.
Okay, and now I can fly back in. And you can totally see we have, this is, wait a second, maybe here. I will explain what goes wrong here. Because we are in an area where...
I love that. You can just literally see like the little green splotches where it got applied randomly, the white, the brown, all. It's just like... It definitely shows how much the artist would still have to go in and finalize this.
Because we are in an area where the ocean starts to, the ocean level starts to creep in. And I'll explain what happens precisely. But you can see that we have the dark rock and then the savanna right next to it, right? So this updated properly. So why do we get the coral spawning in here? Like, why does that happen? Like, this is weird, right? So I didn't paint this down. I didn't want this to happen originally.
It's coral in the forest.
What the objects can basically read out, and what they're also driven by, is what kind of elevation on the planet they are sitting on. And we can basically turn objects on and off based on what elevation level they are on.
All right. I think we covered this one quite a bit. Now, like I said, there is another one like this, and it's called Making Mountains, I believe. And this one it's very similar. This is in 2020, so the same year, just like 6 months later. Obviously, they were doing a lot of work on the Planet Tech around that time. This was the Planet Tech that I think, in their mind, was like their bar. They wanted to meet Planet Tech V4, and that was like, okay, we're good. Planet Tech V4 is in. We're going to build all the systems with this and keep going. I don't know where Planet Tech V5 came from. I think that they generally wanted to get more large-scale structures in the game, which we're going to talk about here. But things went further than this, and this is just kind of him talking about how easy it is to change the height maps,
temperature, size,
almost like they just did with the humidity and temperature we saw.
Or do you have to go in and set all of those things individually each time?
So,
see, it's like the same
something
idea
that we have been discussing,
but instead of changing, I guess no, this is still changing. Yeah, you can see this is actually changing the map where he is. This is a better version than the last one I showed you to show off this functionality. How he can actually select a square that shows temperature and humidity, and then define where on that square certain things pop up, and then they will be able to then, that kind of draws the whole planet. I'm not seeing where he actually applies it. I don't want to do too much searching for it, but you can see it over here on the right-hand side. Basically, this is like a graph, temperature versus humidity. So highest temperature, humidity is top right corner, lowest temperature and humidity is bottom right, and then temperature's highest, humidity's highest here. And you can just define what shows up where based on that 2-axis scale. What we're about to see in Planetech V5 is the axis is much more than 2 at this point. It's like 6, but just to, again, show you how they're continuing to progress through this in the different versions of Planetech.
If you take a look at this square over here, right, it's something that we have already discussed, right?
Literally, he's just going to, okay.
I can take, for example, the obsidian dark biome and paint it down, and you can see that it automatically gets applied here, right? Mm-hmm. So what we could do, because this texture and each and every corner of this texture resembles specific humidity and temperature.
I swear to God, I didn't know that we were right at that spot already.
Situations. Like the top right is cold and dry. The bottom right is hot and dry.
See, I had it backwards.
The bottom left is cold. No, wait. Cold, dry.
Hot, dry, warm, cold, wet, hot, wet.
Warm, dry, warm, wet, and then cold, wet. Yeah, exactly. So I could basically go in and paint something in
this is exactly what I was looking for.
That would logically resemble some climate. For example, if it was Earth, right? I could, where it's cold and dry, I could put my Arctic areas and really paint this square out completely unrelated to any planet or anything really. And then we could throw any data at it and it would redistribute this data logically. So no, we don't.
So you guys can see where this is going. Now we jump forward to 2021. Will Haynes, Water Guy, Moist Boy, Captain Planet, whatever you want to call him. He worked mainly on the river tech at first, did really well on that. Started moving up, started doing more things, taking on more stuff. Now he does a lot of the presentations around the Planet Tech, but I want to highlight a couple of specific things that they talk about during this presentation in 2021 specifically, because they will come up again shortly here. Check this out.
Animals, we can specify a small herbivore, for example, and in the snow, this might spawn some sort of Arctic rabbit, and in the jungle, this might spawn something completely different. We've also begun to experiment with a new foliage shader that takes into account the health of the plant based on its surroundings again, and the current season of the planet, though what you're seeing on the screen is far from final.
Seasons will come up again. Remember that. They have said they want planets to orbit the star in the game. They don't do it because obviously the quantum travel system would need to be able to account for planets and things moving in their orbits. I don't know if they're still going to do that because that's going to be pretty insane. Not only would travel systems have to account for that, but the economic system would have to account for the distances between certain things and the supply and demand between those things. And from what I've seen so far, they haven't really given us much to believe that complexity is still going to be included after quantum has kind of not been discussed so much. But we'll see. Seasons are a thing that keep popping up, though.
In the same vein as that, we've been working towards having more dynamically placed biomes around natural areas. We've created dressing object presets
that zoom, though,
automatically placed around coasts, and of course my favorite thing to work on, rivers. In the most recent couple months, I've been doing more work on the rivers to prepare them to be closer to what we would consider shippable, so that we...
So this was another thing that was very, very common, worked on in Planetech V4 in that sort of interim period. Rivers, water, lakes, and the physics surrounding that, or maybe the lack thereof.
And get them out to the players. This has included finer control of both the shape of our rivers as they flow from springs to larger rivers, but also the objects that spawn around our rivers, so we have control over what spawns in the water, what is spawning on the banks of the river, and what is spawning further away and blending it into the biome that it flows through. The other thing that we've added as well is a wet edge around rocks, both in the sea and in rivers, which reflects the fact that they were probably wet from the river, and so they look a lot more shiny. We've also been working on introducing basins to the river system so that we can have more natural pauses in our river systems and other bodies of water than just the oceans.
Now, then we heard a little bit more about Rastar. This is interesting because this is what's actually leading to our base building tool, which I think they talk about. This is a quick introduction to this because this is related to Planet Tech, and I like to include this just to highlight how much the outposts and the cities and the buildings that we encounter are related to Planet Tech, because that's going to also come up later with Starchitect. But this is the precursor to what Starchitect is now fully. Rastar walked so Starchitect can probably walk faster.
Connectors. Basically, artists create small parts of homesteads that we can then snap together. Every part is modular, so we can interchange multiple ones in order to have procedural homesteads. Every change is very simple. We can change like the whole inside of a homestead, or only a building that is a part of the homestead. In that way, it's very easy to make a lot of different buildings. Once something is connected, it is considered a part of the whole. So it moves as one, it can be deleted and changed, and it's basically all for connectors. So back to you, Morgan.
And last but not least, some of you may have noticed that the UI is not looking quite like an engine UI. And that's normal, as it's based on our in-game UI tech building blocks, and that for a reason. While today it's being used by our developers, one day, when it's ready and been thoroughly tested internally, we'll make a version available to you, the player. And Rastar is what will make you a pioneer.
I think that was the first time. That might have been the first time that they like really confirmed that they were going towards base building.
Thank you for watching.
I don't remember anything earlier than 2021 where they specifically said we're going to do base building and like showed us something that physically made it a thought in people's heads. But this was really the beginning of it, and you could see it was even coming up in the Planet Tech system. So we continue to make progress and jump forward now to 2022, where Planet Tech V4 was launching in Pyro, and that's why Pyro planets look much better than Stanton planets. But one of the big things that was coming with that was this new focus on like doing large scale structures. So he talks about it a little bit here, but we'll also visit a couple of the planets that came in Pyro, because it was a new step for the Planet Tech, but just, again, a temporary one.
It's very organic and natural. Let's jump to the most experimental biome that we've made so far. So for this biome here, the concept art team gave us some really interesting concept art, because this is easily some of the biggest rock formations that we have in the game so far. Actually, let me try to fly a ship so you can see the scale of them. So they're massive in scale, and what was the hardest part about getting these to look right is that they're supposed to look really good from a distance, because you would expect something this big to be visible almost from space. But then the tricky thing is also to make them look good when you're standing up close to them. Let me jump in game. So
I'm amazed that there's no racetrack going through these hoops yet. Or maybe there is, and I just haven't seen it.
Look good.
But that's not the only major feature thing they kind of did. They also did some pretty big, like, planetary features you can see from space during this update, and I think that was a really big focus in Planet Tech V4. Each of these stages, you can tell they're really trying to nail something down. Temperature and humidity, height maps, how did the biomes flow together, even an initial launch. And I think this was a really big part of Planet Tech V4, was like large scale structures, big planetary objects and things like that.
Rocks against the crimson of the soil and the grass. So here's a little happy accident where we have the volumetric clouds covering the terrain. And because the height map, the difference in height is so large, we actually get like shapes of the terrain poking out of the volumetric clouds. Yeah, you can probably spot some of...
This is the freaking coolest thing ever. And that is not all I want to show you in 22, actually. Let's look back here. He did some foliage stuff.
to give you like an in-depth look at some of the biomes. So last year you saw that like yellow is kind of the accent color of Pyro 3. So from this distance you can see through the volumetric clouds like a lot of the yellow coming through. We talked about what's making it look yellow, which is the moss, and I want to like jump down to the planet surface and show you the amount of detail that you will see when going up close to the moss. So we're down at the surface now. I'm just gonna jump in game. A lot of time and effort was spent on making the moss look just right. So like the right level of fluffiness and density. So it looks really nice when it like covers these
It does
rocks.
look great. I don't know if it looks this good in the game when it came in, but this looks phenomenal. I don't spend enough time getting intimate with Bloom to know how the moss looks, but it still is the most beautiful planet until Pyro 4 gets its rings back. With that being said, let's jump forward again to 2024. Actually, was there something in 23? I might be missing something. Okay, this is real quick. I almost skipped over this, but we did have Will come back and show us some more updates to water the next year. So you could see how things were kind of continuing to improve there.
Is I'm going to turn on the debug mode so you can see where the regions are. You see we've got these grey boxes. They light up green when there is a hit inside the box. We've also got different sizes going on. If you look near the shore there's a big cluster of text. That is a whole bunch of other regions because there's some stuff floating there causing little ripples that we can't actually see. And as you see, these scale properly. We can add the results from multiple sizes of simulation together, and they influence and interact with one another accurately. You see those big waves crashing over the little sim there. It works pretty nicely.
They were very happy with this.
Forward in a second, you're going to see the wake start to happen behind us there. And from the
So a lot of work going on with the water production. And then we also did actually see some Maelstrom stuff show up here for the first time. And this was really just a chance for them to show off how they want damage to work. This is kind of included in Genesis, but not really. I don't know. They're a little inconsistent about this part. But it's just environmental destruction and a more systemic way to destroy things that are all broken out into breakable clusters, modeled by cantilever beams, using stress and all kinds of different modulus and strain methods and stuff to figure out when an item should break and where it should break. So this was an interesting part of the Planet Tech demos because it was kind of talking about some interesting bits. The most interesting thing they actually said here was that they were going to start working on machine learning, commonly known as AI, in Star Citizen's development, particularly in making planets. I'll let Ali Brown, though, talk about that here.
However, they are built from type of tile sets, like pre-built things to get mixed and matched together and blended in complicated ways so that you don't see the repetition. But it's not truly unique, not in the same way that the Grand Canyon might be, or the River Nile, or Mount Everest. And that's what we want. So to get that, we need to replicate the complicated natural processes on Earth, like geology, climate, erosion, and these things aren't trivial. So we've got three options. We've got offline tools, Houdini, Terragen, things like this, where you could simulate all these processes in the engine. But we've started some R&D a few months ago on whether we can use machine learning to do some of this. So just to give you a quick idea of how that would work, or how it could work, if you just start with some random input here, it's just like some noise. We run it through a temporary simulation, so we can type of get a more reasonable approximation of simulation at different altitudes and latitudes on Earth. And then what we do is we categorize all this into different biomes. So based on the temperature and moisture, you'd find out what is a desert, what is a forest. And this part is crucial. So this is the input for our machine learning algorithm.
That's the same stuff that we just saw them doing manually. And this is him basically just describing them saying, we're going to have the machines take it over. You know, who better to create our environments than machines? Once they do that, they control everything.
For this image any other way, you could hand paint it as an artist, or we could just randomize the noise to get a different set of images. And then what we do is we take the large data sets we already have from Earth, from Mars, and from the Moon, and we train it on exactly the same distribution, so biomes, so forests, grasslands, and things like this. And by training it on exactly the type of data we get in reality, we can take this and then push just that, and then we can get these lovely height maps out of it that tell us a really realistic distribution. You can see here, this is a height map, so the black areas are low. You can see all the little rivers and valleys, and this had 0 art input aside from this image, which is a very nice result. It's early days. This is based on something called a custom diffusion neural network. It's, like I said, it's pre-trained on Earth data, and it's been built up in patches so that it just doesn't become too expensive to build. And the little circular patches get added together, and to avoid any seams in the image. And then just to help you visualize it, I've just put some colorization on it to show you where snow and beaches might be, and just wrapped it around a planet to give you a better sense so it doesn't look quite so abstract. Yeah, but this is very early days, this stuff, but we're hopeful this will be helping the future of how we build planets quickly and efficiently.
So that was where they were at the end of 2023. And shout out to chat, probably commenters too. Machine learning is not the same as AI. Whatever stuff you would like to call machine learning or the computers doing the stuff based on our input and their output, that's what they want to do with the planets going forward. And the next year, they actually started to show some of that stuff off. So that's where we bring the kind of introduction of Genesis. And this is where they made some mistakes. So first thing to know about Genesis is that it is not what people think it is. Genesis is not coming this year. Genesis is only part of Genesis is coming this year. If you click into the roadmap, you'll see that there are 3 things I think currently listed under Genesis. First, we have wherever it is. Locations? Might be in locations. Not in locations. Crytek? Probably in Crytek. Gotta be in Crytek. Starchitect is one part of Genesis. This is used to scatter ground locations based on environmental and designer data to populate the world of Star Citizen at an unprecedented scale. Then we have Planetech V5. This is implementing the next generation of world creation with increased scale, complexity, and believability. And we also have dynamic weather. Real-time simulation of weather fronts on a planetary scale, including rain, wind, and thunder. Now, outside of that, we also do have Maelstrom, and there is Global Illumination, StarAudio. All of these things, if you go to the presentation here where they introduce us to the idea of Genesis, are all different phases of what they call Genesis. And this is, I think this is where, once again, where CIG managed to mess everything up and confuse everyone with their naming without needing to. If you look down at the bottom of this video, you'll see there is a phase 1 of Genesis. That phase 1 includes Planetech V5. And then it switches over to phase 2 of Genesis, which includes Starchitect. What you're going to hear in a little bit when we talk to Mr. Benoit, CTO guy here, is he's going to say we're delivering Starchitect and Planetech V5. Those are just the first 2 phases of Genesis. There's still, what is this? This is AI improvements, teaching AI how to navigate planets, because holy crap, have you seen them try to do anything in this game? There is also light and sound. So this is StarAudio as well as ray tracing and global illumination features, which I don't know why they tied that into Genesis, but they did at this point at least. And then there's also StarAudio, which is sound effects, changes to things like the Doppler effect.
It's not too easy to tell what's going on there.
Things like that. And then finally, dynamic weather.
See the wind picking up, terrain and rocks are getting wet.
All of this is Genesis, but all of this is not coming this year. So put expectations there, because I do feel like people are getting excited for Genesis, and because CIG introduced all of this as Genesis, people might think there's more stuff coming than what is. But I genuinely think it's just going to be Planetech V5 and Starchitect and some population management stuff. But Benoit will talk about that in a minute. Let's listen to what they said are the new updates to Planetech over what we've been watching for the last hour. Oh, here's a nice mention of seasons again.
Now, this isn't the only thing that will drive the color of the leaves. We're going to introduce the concept of seasons to the game. And this will mean our planets will evolve through the year, and we'll be able to shed leaves from trees and have the grass wither in winter.
It'd actually be funny if you build a base in a nice hidden place and then it's just not hidden because the season changes.
Or a place where there's no seeds for a specific asset, you might start to get this coming in. Let's take a look from a larger perspective again.
This is arguably the best change they made to this version.
So, to take you through some of the things we saw in that clip, let's talk about rocks first. So anyone that's done a lot of ground driving and ground vehicles might have seen that our rocks sometimes feel a little bit randomly scattered, and it can be quite an obstacle sometimes. So in this clip, you saw that the rocks are no longer randomly scattered, and they're now placed based on physically based rule sets. And this logical grouping is achieved via erosion simulations, which we run offline to build localized data maps. And they describe the size of the aggregate and rocks and the density and where they should naturally form. And that means we get things like these natural clusters of boulders at the forest edge underneath the cliffside. And on that note, you might have noticed that the cliffs have been dramatically improved in how they shade. We also see things like the natural clumping of vegetation caused by seed dispersal. This is controlled per species, so we can get better emulation of their
seed dispersal, you know? What's your seed dispersal algorithm looking like these days, Joe? Imagine the like lunch conversations you'd have. Clearly it's looking a lot better and more natural than before.
Much larger scale.
I think this all gets more exciting and is probably more necessary because base building. But a lot of you are probably looking at this and thinking, okay, cool, but my graphics card is melting. Let's talk about actual improvements they've made to make it run better, because that's a big part of PlanetTech V5 as well.
On many cores. So yeah, with all this new data sets and these physically based spawning rules, you're probably wondering, how is this going to handle in your CPU? We don't want to melt anyone's CPU, so we've redesigned all of this tech to work much more efficiently than before, and now it can run on many cores. This allows it to be run perfectly well on both the CPU and the GPU. So we've redesigned our framework so that we can run it at both and swap between them freely. Now, the benefit of this is we can do things like, first off, move the terrain system to the GPU, and we've now done that to get some incredible performance improvements, but we then also cache the results in something we call a virtual terrain texture. I'll give you a quick demo of this now. This is now vastly faster than the previous system, but it also allows us to generate the terrain in much higher resolution, which means all the popping you can see on the mountains as we're approaching, all of that should be completely eliminated on the right-hand side of the screen.
Somebody was asking about pop-in earlier on YouTube chat, I believe. There are definitely things in PlanetTech V5 that are not just about making it look better. optimization's a big part of this version because they are trying to build a lot more stuff into these planets. Will it work? I don't know. But at least it's not just all about, ooh, prettier.
You can see on the mountains as we're approaching, all of that should be completely eliminated on the right-hand side of the screen.
With the extra headroom we've gained by making our terrain system more efficient, we've been able to introduce some improvements, including high resolution.
Never mind. It's just like the cell phone companies. They're like, we made the batteries so much more efficient. You're going to get so many more hours out of your battery. It's great. Your phone's going to last all day, so we made the screen bigger.
Ground textures, proper blending between surface types, and of course better tiling. If you're familiar with any of our planets, we've taken off all the assets so you can see the issue. And now how it looks, you don't see those lines going at all.
One more.
That is egregious on the left.
With the terrain data cached on the GPU, like Ali said, we can perform the scattering there too, which is significantly faster. All those algorithms that we've used to generate those first bits can run there without being more expensive on your CPU. And it also means the results are directly there on the GPU. We can render straight from them. That allows us to have dramatically more density in our new system. We can render objects directly without having to go via the CPU every frame. We also cull at different levels of granularity, with bigger groups in the distance and individual assets up close. Just as a demonstration, this is the sort of density you can expect on micro.
Okay, this is actually, I think this is probably the most impressive part of this whole change.
Tech today, and in a second we'll flip over to what you can expect from the new upcoming tech.
If they can actually do this, that's going to be crazy.
In a second, we're going to turn on the culling groups debug so you can see. These are the groups that will create of those trees and of the terrain. And as we get closer, we shrink them so we're more intelligently rendering what we need without having to assess each tree individually, all the way down to the ground.
Planet Tech team does some freaking crazy work. So here is the summary again of phase 1 of Genesis. Remember, we are not getting all of Genesis all at once.
So to recap some of the things you've seen here in phase 1, we had data-driven rules based on physically based data, generating emergent biomes that continuously vary across our planets to get infinite possibilities. And we've achieved this with much greater density than before and much faster rendering. And we also achieved seamless transitions from ground to space with zero popping. So now that we've got all this tech, it's time to talk about how art might make use of this.
All right. And that's where things get exciting because those guys were the technical guys. Those are the engineers who built the tech. They know how it works. They are the ones who create the paintbrush, right? And then these dudes take the paintbrush and apply it into the game. And you can see just how wild they went with it. Dude, they freaking love their Star Wars reference. He's trying to force lift it out of the swamp. They love those references. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we're going to see this in the following year. But look at the scale that they're going to hit with the foliage in these planets because it gets a little crazy. This is something I do want to highlight here.
Variant to provide some visual density for the shrub layer. To add some Jurassic vibes, we made tree ferns, as they can be found in New Zealand's redwood forests. The most important one, though, obviously sequoias. And they ended up being one of our most complex sets yet.
There's a person.
As it turns out, they can grow to be fairly ridiculous in size. It keeps going.
It keeps going. So they're like, the artists clearly have felt like they can do a lot with this new version of Planetech, and I think that's why this has taken so long, just because like it took some time to get the engineering done, but now they've been really expanding it. And that brings us to phase 2 of Planetech. This is arguably one of the more insane things I've heard them propose, but from the whispers and murmurs, it's coming along, and they've actually kind of combined this with Planetech V4, and I think this is going to be one of the biggest changes to how Star Citizen is supposed to work as a game. I'll try to not spend too much time on this topic because it can get kind of exciting.
All right. Those new planets and biomes were pretty, right? But it's time for Phase 3 Civilization to give you some stuff to do. So, let's talk about location density. We've emulated nature as well as we can to make sure our planets are physically based and realistic, and our biomes are emergent. But it's time to start populating the verse, because where there's people, there are their lives and the structures they build. So it makes sense that whenever you go and explore these planets, that you find their lives. And what's even more important is that when we make these structures, that they use and they follow the same rules as our biomes, such as the jungles and the swamps. Quality and improve on our previous work and make it even better. And any location that you'll find needs to have its own unique personality and no repetition. We don't want you to find the same location twice. This also means that this is your exploration and your findings. So when you go on,
keep that statement in mind. Let's go back to that one.
And no repetition. We don't want you to find the same location twice.
Keep that in mind when we get to the end of this presentation, because
you find you can share with your orgs or with your friends. As for that density, if you fly down to the planet, we want you to find something, let's say every 100 clicks, but also improve the mission experience. So when you stay more on the planet, you're more immersed and you go from location to location. Just keep going.
One thing that's pretty cool, if you do go to the monthly reports lately, we will throw a dart in the dark and hope that this actually works, because sometimes it can embarrass me. Let's go to the monthly report of April. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're mentioning the construction of this system, Starchitect, in line with the mission system. Narrative development continued on the Starchitect tool to incorporate narrative needs into the projection of outposts and characters to ensure assets are created in line with the planet lore. In an effort to get ahead, there were also initial conversations about initiatives later in the year to try and anticipate what kind of content would be captured sooner than later. It's kind of talking about it. Hold on, let's try May. There we go. Towards the mission system, the team fixed issues causing rewards to not be correctly attributed or progress for event trackers to be incorrectly calculated. Progress also began on implementing Mission V2 functionality into Starchitect, including the ability to dynamically create new mission locations without designer intervention, greatly improving the speed of development. This is an attempt to link this new location creation tool with the new mission creation tool that they're also working on, in hopes that they can procedurally make locations and missions that pop up for us and give us more content as we move throughout the game, instead of them having to keep hand creating all these things. They're trying to say this happens without repetition, and I think that this is the sort of thing that we just need to look towards Star Citizen 4.8.3 to see what it means. And that is like, we're getting random missions that are really the same as other missions, but with Xenothreat being the enemy and alien ships being the target. And I think those are the kinds of things we'll see differentiating stuff. It can get repetitive, but it can also work out, I think. And I'm very hopeful that they can find a good balance. But let's continue on.
So going forward, we are modularizing all our existing locations and assets, and we're basically making a library of buildings and layouts that we'll be using to no longer work directly on the planet. The neat thing, all these modules and assets can be iterated upon and tested right in the editor for all the designers and artists to ensure fun gameplay and interactive sandbox activity, and also make sure all the mission stuff is there. Basically, we're building a toolkit.
This would be amazing if it was, if we knew that Quantum was still going to be creating supply and demand between all these locations. I really hope we see something like that soon.
So let's look at some of the things that we need to keep in mind as we are making that toolkit. First and foremost, we've got our art style and branding. We've got things like Frontier for our settlements. We've got high-tech for the emergency shelters, but also utilitarian, like our bunkers and distribution centers.
I just like to draw back to one of our favorites here on the, one of our favorite things to look at here on the channel whenever we're doing talks about Planet Tech or building styles or anything like that is this architectural style guide that they released back in 2019, which is where he's pulling these exact words from. I'm not going to say that means that they are still using this guide, but I think it's possible. As you can see here, we've got utilitarian down here. Talk about mechanical and industrial styles, function, aesthetic, durable stuff, and that's generally Hurston R-Corp kind of stuff. Then over here, we've got colonialism, frontier vibe, use of natural materials, derelict archetype. We know that's in Pyro. Up here, where he was just talking about high-tech, we've got industrial design, focus, advanced manufacturing, beautiful function, and this is literally a picture of a Rayari outpost in the Stanton system. They still got a few more. Henoism is actually one that they've said is coming with Castra. They've already confirmed, so that should be here soon. Metaclassicism, I think, is something that we'll probably see in Terra along with Streamline. If you look at the building styles actually from Terra, I think I've got a screenshot of Terra I can pull up here real quick. Yeah, so this is the picture most people know of Terra. Obviously, it's high tech, but then there are also some shots of other biomes, building type biomes in Terra like this, which looks a little bit different, and this, which really gives that vibe of what Streamline looks like on that other page. If you come back to this, you see like the curved building thing is really popping up here on Terra as well. So I think they're going to start to introduce these other types and styles soon. Super modernism probably is something we'll also see on Terra. But in general, they're following the art style from 2019 pretty closely, at least when they talk about this stuff. And I think that's cool. I like to see that kind of consistency.
The richer the data, the richer these locations will be. Secondly, they all have a function. We've got mining for our mining outposts, farming for the farmsteads, or just places where people live. The function of the place will define the way the place looks as well, and its form.
So we hear more about this up here, where they kind of talk about this stuff. Here we go. Some examples of what these locations would be.
You know, make a location. We can define the rules, as I've mentioned a couple times by now. So for our mining outpost, it wants to be near a resource. We can specify what this resource needs to be. But we can also give suggestions where sometimes you'd find it here and sometimes you wouldn't. If the location has refineries, it might want to be near water to refine the resources. Then secondly, we can define what buildings should be there. So obviously we need mining buildings, houses for people to live as well, and even power buildings that we can leverage with the resource network. Starchitect will intelligently figure out where to place these and what needs to be at the location. Next up, farms. Its rules, well, temperature. Not every plant can live in every temperature, but the same with soil type. Only certain plants can be in certain grounds.
I do think this is also how they're starting to build farming gameplay, which is going to be a thing, just in the same way that you will have to go certain places to farm certain minerals, you'll have to go certain places to farm certain plants, and certain plants will give us different kinds of crafting opportunities when it comes to nutrition and cooking. Both things that have been confirmed in crafting. You can go back to the CitizenCon 2023 to check that out. 24. Yeah, 24. And I think it's kind of all being built into Planet Tech V4 in a way. At least the infrastructure for it to work. Maybe not the gameplay.
And then we can query the seed map to determine what plants you would find there. What are the harvestables? As for the targets, again, farm buildings, obviously, power buildings.
So I also think ranching is going to be a thing, like a player
such as our
thing.
Beloved quasi-grazers. And last but not least, Derelict ships, we've got these all over the place currently. Rules, well, they'd be close to anti-air because they would be shot down. But even in harsh flight conditions, such as mountains or low visibility, you'd probably most commonly find them. Targets, well, crash ship parts, of course. Sometimes you'd find the full remains of a javelin, and the other time you might just find the nose of a starfare laying around.
All right. And this is how they will be placed on the planet. You can actually see this already happening in Pyro, interestingly enough, so I don't think this is... I think they've already got this part working.
Let's talk about clusters. Clustering means generating locations near other locations. So, for example, if you find a distribution center, just like in the verse currently, I would find forward operating bases next to them. But if you go even further out, you'd find mining outposts to funnel those resources to the FOBs. Go out even further, you'd find caves around them, because that's where they might find some of the gems. And then we can even specify the data on a cluster level. All of the factions that live at this whole cluster, any mining outpost, that would be the same people, but also what commodities they sell, to find on what resource you'd find.
All right, and then finally, the big kicker. Remember what I said about not having repeat areas? Now imagine that with multiple planets in a star system with what he's about to show us on each planet. Because it's a tall order.
Just like our locations, we can put clusters near other clusters, and we group them together, ranging between 10 to 15 locations each. And we group this into what we call a sector. Like this one, that has about 120 locations. However, on a planetary scale, we can define how many sectors we should have, with each their own data and persona. And every single one of these locations is now ready for the mission system to hook up and give you gameplay, and for you to find a bunch of places on your own. And just on this side of the planet, can you guess the number? We've got about 3,042 locations. And again...
So that is a fundamental change to how this game is supposed to work. That's no longer fly between planets to different star systems running missions and stuff. That's like go to a planet and stay on that planet for days running like local missions. I do not know how that's gonna function or how that's gonna work, but this has certainly gotten more attention and more work and more talk than like I'm seeing in chat. Quantum, not Quanta. Don't start with me. The quantum conversations have really put a damper on how you can react to these kinds of things. I agree, but I do feel like this has more momentum behind it than that ever did. And here is where the CTO of the company really talks about, when asked about the secret things that maybe people don't know about, that he's more excited about, that don't get talked about as much in like these kinds of shows. He goes into what exactly they're releasing from this presentation, because again, this is phase 1, the planets. This is phase 2, the Starchitect, but there are still multiple phases after this that we're going to get to in a little bit. Let's just listen to what Benoit has to say about these 2 first deliveries coming sometime soon.
Run info on is Genesis, okay, and Nix 1, right? Okay. So, I mean, we're obviously working on this. That's no surprise to anyone. But the one thing that I'm excited about is that we've kind of conjoined development on 3 separate things in order to ship the best Nix experience that we could offer, right? And so, obviously, Genesis is part of that, and the Planet Tech that's behind it. But also, the Starchitect work. And so, for those who don't know, Starchitect is a way for us to be smarter about building planets and the human populations that are on them. So settlements, buildings, distro centers, LZs, name it, right? So historically, we've placed that by hand. And so Starchitect is a way for us to give designers control over the planetary scale of how these are distributed. And it's a fairly fundamental change to how the game is made. And the third one is what we call the population control / population manager. So currently you have AIs in the game, right, that are sometimes hand placed, sometimes dynamically spawned. We've talked about
spawn like a crackhead
gazillion
just hitting a
times.
spawn button.
Yeah, which is my biggest pet peeve, by the way.
Apologies to
That's my trigger
crackheads.
point. If you want to trigger me in a meeting, just tell me there's another overspawn issue. But anyway, so population management and control is a third component of this. So I'm excited about this because as we're working towards next one, we're aligning all those three things into one strike team to deliver that together. So I'm excited about that because those are like three major development pieces that Star Citizen needs to scale that we're bringing in together. So for pop control, instead of having all these either hand-placed or dynamically spawned AIs in key areas, that's a system that will basically manage the server capacity of AI agents to be able to distribute them at the right place, but also spawn the right AIs for the right jobs, manage the priority of these spawn requests, all that stuff. And so it's such a much more scalable system that will allow us to really like build up a dense universe than we've had before. So I'm excited about the fact that those three projects are part of the same kind of drive at the moment. That's the first thing I would say that you guys don't know about that we're going to bring together.
So he didn't say a date there. He didn't necessarily say that year or this year, but Nix 1 is a big goal for them this year. We're going to talk about it here in a minute. But there's still more to Genesis besides that. So clearly there's a lot more progress that needs to be made. One of the big things is AI. And I think that what really will kill this whole thing from actually working is the AI in this game sucks. It just doesn't, it has not proven to us that it knows how to handle complex actions with players in the area. And they need to get that proven before I think anyone believes that Starchitect is actually going to bring a real big change to the game. Now, they've talked about it a little bit. Specifically, that's not the right spot. Specifically when it comes to things like perception and like movement.
The two colorful cones. The graph on the left basically represents.
And this is one of the main guys on their AI programming talking. I wouldn't call Ben the new Tony Z. Benoit has done a ton to make this game work. Benoit has been there since 2014. He helped put together Spectrum. He has helped put together server meshing. He's helped run a lot of what's going on with the engine, with getting the Turbulent team integrated and up to speed. I wouldn't say everything that he says comes true, but the dude clearly puts results down.
The current light level the NPC is in, and the current multiplier this light level generates to speed up or slow down the NPC perception and understanding. The two cones instead represents the primary and secondary FOV.
He actually, I think, shows that the dog has its own perception here.
Enforce response. Result in the FOV.
I think he just mentions that. This is also, though, covering the AI's ability to handle the actual changing world. They're talking about all this stuff being added in Planetech, including Maelstrom. The AI needs to actually be able to understand that.
Uses to understand if they can hide behind something and if they can shoot from some positions. So up to now, we have had an approach where designer would be a designer-driven approach. Designer can define in the locations where cover was interesting. They could mark it up, either the location itself or prefabs. And then with a special entity that would just sample dynamically the environment, but would still be designer-driven. This is obviously a good approach it's also a standard approach in gaming industry. But what about all those organic and inorganic elements that get scattered with a new system? Like if designers want to iterate on these ones, for example, and they want to change the physical data sets, those scattering tools will just change completely the layout. And what we want is that designers can do this change without being afraid of doing it because the gameplay was, predefined and controlled.
Here's an example.
Elements of the environment. Whenever navigation mesh generates, NPC can now have a chance to fight with you hiding behind available elements.
Chat's bringing up a good point. With high server FPS, the AI does okay, but I still haven't seen them do complex things, like tractor beaming boxes into ships and stuff like that. Shooting is one thing, but we need to see AI that can do more at these outposts,
So be careful where you park your Ursa, because now it can become a source of danger for you as well.
So this is a lot of AI stuff, and then Maelstrom is also here.
The the coverage generation navigation mesh as it is, because there is just no way for us to predict anything that you're doing, and we want just Maelstrom to be another trigger for word evaluation. So as you see, this is all dynamically generating and destroying.
Again, all of these are things that we looked at on the roadmap here. Your Starchitect, Planet Tech, Dynamic Weather, Maelstrom, they're all listed here and you can follow along with them. You can see StarAudio and Global Illumination also here, and you can actually find those right here in the presentation.
You've got the sun, you've got the sky.
This is phase 4
if you're behind a tree,
of Genesis.
You've got the sky. And so you need that sky. These open areas benefit in the same way as the forest scene did, adding areas of shade and areas of open lighting. Like I mentioned, the time of day shifting leads to different ambience as the sun moves.
That looks so much better.
And this is the shot that I just liked. Finally, let's see how the new GI system can brighten up your character's day.
Getting better server FPS. And then we have a presentation on audio. We've been tracking this one for a while.
The ones that come later.
Most interesting, I think, are the explosions and Doppler sets.
Just one. So again, cinematic effect first when you see it. Shockwave. And the explosion itself.
That took a while.
The sense of speed. Or we can temperature. So for example,
I missed the Doppler one. I think that's earlier on here.
So you can hear the pitch and tempo changing as we move relative to the Benny Noodle machine, and this is all fully systemic, no special treatment for this sound.
And then finally we have dynamic freaking weather, which this is going to get the people going.
Wind data, stratus and cumulus alike. Now we start seeing the new cloud shading model come into play. We are seeing enhanced occlusion beneath the cover, emphasizing the sunbeams how it interact with the clouds, and seeing the light shafts peer through the layers. Now, as this is closing in, we can start to see the changes in visibility of the area. Light precipitation is starting. Previously, we authored static cloud shapes, but no longer. We didn't manually place a volume here. Its presence has been informed by Genesis data. Oh, and it's not just a cloud volume. It's a weather front. Now we're trying to see the wind picking up. Terrain and rocks are getting wet. Vegetation, grass, and the overall environment are responding to the weather. The system is changing the world around us. We can see puddles being formed dynamically in the dirt, properly responding to light, reflections, and rain droplets, making it getting really ominous and loud in here. I can feel the danger. I think we should let this play out in the game.
Benoit loves his guided view.
Get back here. Getting out of this suit now. Powering
popping up and flying out. We'll need to switch to IFR. See you on the other side.
They're doing a lot to make this feel like this is almost like that Planet Tech demo we started with, right? They're trying to show off the weather here, but they're building an entire scene out of it that I don't think is super reflective. Imagine you just get hit by a lightning strike and that's it. Game over. And then even better, your friend just freaking keeps flying. Your friend just leaves. So that is that was the full look at Genesis. And again, to make clear, we're only getting Planet Tech and Starchitect this year. We are not getting all of Genesis. Now, this is a full representation of what we are looking at. Again, not all of Genesis, just the new Planet Tech. And they gave us a whole presentation of it at 2025 CitizenCon to make it very clear to us that we're not getting all of Genesis.
At Cloud Imperium Games, we believe art inspires the best technology. And through the development of that technology, it pushes us to create even better art. When Genesis comes to the persistent universe starting next year, it will change how you experience every world. And not just in the building of the new planets for the Nyx system. We will also go back through Stanton and Pyro and reimagine them through the lens of our technology. Previously,
no time frame on that.
And more traditionally, we'd create slices of biomes like deserts or forests. This approach moved us forwards and got us this far, but solving the scale was always tricky. And for Star Citizen, we like to do scale on another level. Issues like seeing tiling from our height maps from high altitude, or the unpredictable blending when two biomes connected, were common. But ultimately, things just never felt right.
This is like the more packaged version of everything we just watched. So I'm going to skip ahead to where you actually start showing the stuff. This is the refined version of what we just saw in that year prior, actually made into what they want to do on Nyx 1, which is the first place we're going to see Genesis.
With Genesis, we've made a complete paradigm shift to how we do things. Biomes are now created based on the physical data sets, with the assets being spawned whenever and wherever the correct criteria is found. So when you see a forest or a meadow, it's no longer because an artist painstakingly crafted it there. It's now because it simply wants to be there. It fits inside our rules.
It won't sit. Dying
Genesis
for it.
Also ties into our other gameplay systems. Our new planets are built from the information we create for our different data sets, like height maps, humidity, temperature, soil types, soil amounts, geology erosion data, to name but a few. This means you can now tell where to find valuable minerals as the geology looks like it would be suitable for it.
That's something that they've slowly been working towards already, but I do think is a big part of why it doesn't really matter to be too worried about how minerals are scattered for crafting right now, because this is going to just redo it all anyways.
Where scree piles exist below sheer cliff faces, and where rocks have broken off over time due to erosion. Of course, these new tools still give us the ability to direct the look and feel we want. The attention to detail from the tallest mountain to the smallest flower is still our core DNA. With Genesis, we can now keep that detail-orientated mindset as we focus on the quality, and it provides the quantity. Genesis provides our planets with the ultimate sense of exploration.
See, he keeps saying Genesis, and I think that's why people think this is all Genesis. Because it looks like it. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you think that?
And hone in on the final look for Nyx.
Thanks, Ian. So, in case it's not already clear, Genesis is our name for a group of technologies that are improving our ability to build worlds, refining those that we've already created, and ultimately expanding our persistent universe to the scale and quality that we all expect. I work on planet tech, so let's talk about how that's continued to evolve since our presentation last year. And instead of just highlighting some really cool biomes that we can create, let's go ahead and show how all this work applies to the upcoming planets of Nyx. So there are 3 planets in Nyx. Nyx 3 is a gas
Let's jump forward to
giant
Nyx 1.
biomes for you to discover.
Sorry, we're limited on time now.
So, let's approach this planet in much the same way that you, the player, will. Forward is far more tied to what is present on the surface. Previously, we had different data that drove the orbital and ground coloring. That's because the orbit was designed to look like vegetation that we'd place on the surface, and the ground coloring was trying to be a mix of soil, rock, and the organic compound coloring that forms the kind of colors there. Now we author much more of the data in a unified way.
This definitely looks like a much more in-game version than what we saw last year.
For ocean and vegetation, and brown or yellowy tones for sand and soil. We wanted to keep it as simple as that. The same set of textures and data that define the color of the soil, sand, and rock on the ground are used to create the orbital look. We then assess the presence of vegetation and competition between different species on each part of the planet, and use that to blend in tones of green, including variations due to species health and the current season. This creates a far more complete image and allows you to identify features, geologies, and potential points of interest all the way from space. Let's go down to the surface and start with something closer to what you're used to, but in a whole new light.
I'm going to jump forward a little bit more to this.
That's on you. The rock assets themselves have had a glow up too. We now create rock sets related to a particular geology that look like they originated from the same source. And this ties into how we'll be distributing minables in much more interesting ways too. So now that our base terrain and rock scattering looks good, let's add some vegetations and explore some additional biomes.
So,
Nyx 1.
The thing that's not being said here and doesn't get said at all during this CitizenCon is the inclusion of Starchitect. And that's why this talk with Benoit was so important. That was why this was such an important moment, because it made us realize that they were combining the planet tech that they had already confirmed was coming in Nyx 1 with Starchitect, which is a huge increase in potential to that than just new planets. Imagine if they just dropped in Nyx 1. It was beautiful to look around. There were some outposts scattered throughout, but in general, it was just like visiting Pyro 4. everybody would get bored after the first couple of, well, okay, that's not true. Plenty of people would not get bored with that. But for a lot of folks, I think the interest would move on quickly because there's not as much gameplay. This confirmation that Starchitect and the population management is also coming, I think makes the prospect of Nyx 1 and what they're doing with the first and second phase of Genesis this year much more interesting.
Forests and grasslands are full of trees, various grass species, rock formations, and they're found in all sorts of elevations, like mountain valleys, open plains, and dense meadows. And when we start to add a bit of fresh water, they begin transitioning into more wetland-type biomes. And while forests are super cool, let's focus on the grasslands and wetlands today. So, how are we making these look so great? Obviously, we've had grass before, but never meadows of it. Because until now, we haven't been able to spawn grass in large enough quantities or effectively represented at distance.
I hear they were just crazy with lawnmowers.
Some more dramatic rockscapes, those muggy wetlands, or even our festering swamps.
Festering.
So yeah, we didn't forget about the swamps, and they're coming to Nyx 1 as well. Built using the lessons learned and all the technologies we've developed, these swamps now spring into existence from the planetary data. This biome combines all of the elements from the other biomes we've shown you today, from water interaction, denser spawning, unique ground coverage, and I think it creates something really unique. Anyway, that's our update on the Planet Tech portion of Genesis and how we're using it right now to sculpt the identity of Nyx 1. And I hope you're as excited as we are to explore this and everything we haven't shared yet next year.
Let's go back to that real quick.
Anyway, that's our update on the Planet Tech portion of Genesis.
The Planet Tech portion of Genesis. Just keep, I know I sound like a broken record, but like CIG keeps on confusing everyone with the naming and how it gets used and then when it gets used and all that. And Genesis is not coming in 2026. Just the Planet Tech and Starchitect part are. Granted, I think that's probably the biggest part of it. It's the part a lot of people are most excited about, so it's still plenty exciting. I think this could mark a pretty significant design shift for how Star Citizen works, but we'll see if it actually kicks off that way. Obviously, there's going to be tons of glitches. This is not going to be a smooth rollout. There's going to be all kinds of problems, and it should be a lot of fun. But I think that we'll probably be seeing this in November or maybe December, and it's probably going to be the biggest update of the year. Anyways, this was not supposed to be that long of a deep dive, but at least we got through it.